let's dive right into the players that have been called up. Let's start, as always, with the back, our goalkeepers, two of them for Emma Hayes, Alyssa Nair and Casey Murphy being called up for the Olympics. The defensive line, 6 players: Tierna Davidson, Emily Fox, Naomi Girma, Casey Krueger, Jenna Nightswanger, and Emily Sonnet as the defensive core for the United States. In the midfield, 5 players: Corbin Albert, Sam Coffey, Lindsay Horan, Rose Lavelle, and Katarina Macario. And rounding out the 18 with the forward line, 5 players: Crystal Dunn, Trinity Rodman, Jaden Shaw, Sophia Smith, and Mallory Swanson. The alternates that Emma Hayes has called up for the United States are goalkeeper Jane Campbell, midfielder Hal Hirschfeld, midfielder Croy Bethune, and forward Lynn Williams. We have to get initial thoughts. Sandra, I'm going to you first. You're wearing a hat. Take off the hat. Let us know all your thoughts inside your head when you saw this 18-player roster drop.
I will say lots of players that we have all spoken about over the last several months, lots of players that we had as locks on our rosters going to the Olympics. But the combination of alternates and the omission of Alex Morgan, I will just say I was respectfully stunned. I think it is absolutely a turning of the guard, changing of the guard, turning of the page, more symbolism in this new Emma Hayes era that we're all witnessing and embracing, really. I think it's an incredible testament to what she's trying to build with this team moving forward. I'm sure that was not an easy call to make, or a roster to name, or player to leave out, honestly. And I think everything about Emma Hayes is just, or every little thing that goes by, whether it's a friendly or a game or a lineup or a formation, or in this case, an Olympic roster, is just showing us more and more about the direction in which she wants to take this program.
Ooh, I like that. All right, Darian, what do you think when you saw the names?
I said, this is my exact roster I put out on A3 last week. Hell yeah. Uh, no, in all seriousness, I love it because we've all talked about how she's going to come in, she's going to shake things up. She's not concerned about, I don't want to say politics, but the influence that US soccer, I think, has always kind of had
Right.
on coaches that come into this program. She doesn't care.
Mhm.
She's showing that. Sandra, I think you said it well. This new guard of the young bucks coming in, she is setting the tone that this is a new era. Out with the old, in with the new. We're starting fresh. This is how I'm going to run things. I'm not going to be influenced at all. And ball dropped. I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ball dropped young. A lot of young players, which a lot of analysts, ourselves included, wanted and we expected from this roster. Taking only 18 players is a really tight, small group. And Emma Hayes has had a lot of time to think about this. Both sides. She's had a lot of time, but also not a lot of time, right? Only one
Mhm.
camp and 2 matches where she got to see players in person and make these decisions. But she's also had a lot of time to think about this and watch the World Cup last year, where she had no say and she wasn't even involved in US soccer, and see what these players were doing. And this is her chance to build a foundation at US soccer of what the United States women's national team can be moving forward. And that was my initial impression. This is the future that Emma Hayes wants to build with this group. And it features a lot of young players. It's a young roster. The average age is 26.8 years old. That is the 4th youngest U.S. roster that the United States has ever sent to the Olympics. And compared to the last Olympics in Tokyo in 2020, 2021, they that average age was 30.8. So now it's 26.8. Definitely skewing younger, skewing less caps as well when you look at it from that front, because right now it features 58 caps, the average player, and for Tokyo it was 111 caps. Now that is prior to the final 2 match day send-offs. But let's dig a little bit deeper into these 18 players and everything that has happened, because there are some maybe surprises on this roster, even including the 4 alternates that have been called up. One of the players that a lot of people had talked about, was she going to go, was she not, was Casey Krueger. And I believe both of you had Krueger on your rosters going to the Olympics. Sandra, when you saw her name on this, how did that kind of solidify your decision as to why she should be going?
I think it goes hand in hand when I'm going to maybe touch on Lynn Williams a little bit here too, in terms of looking at players that maybe kind of can be that definitive Emma Hayes type of player. And for me, maybe I didn't think that was so much the case with Lynn Williams, but she's going as an alternate now. But when it came to someone like Casey Krueger, she fit the profile for me. I mean, you want to have someone who can not only have that experience going into a tournament like this, but has the experience of international tournaments and national team camps, but positionally as well. This is a player who is no stranger to having played across the entire back line in varying formations as well, whether it's been in a traditional 4-back as a fullback getting up the flank, or as someone who needs to maybe operate as one of the defensive backs in a fluctuating 3-back. Like, she has that experience. This is not something that is unfamiliar for her. Want her to be an outside back? Cool. She'll go do it. You want her to be a center back? Cool. She'll go do it. A very prototypical show up, hard hat, lunch pail, recognize your assignment, and go do your job. And I think for Emma Hayes, having that versatility, but also having a player with that level of trust, I think that you can task them with something and they'll go do it, I think is huge. So while she'll probably get a lot of questions, Emma Hayes, about, experience and leadership and stuff like that, there's a ton of players across this roster that I think can be leaned on for that. And I think one of those is Krueger as well.
I
Surprising
completely
for you.
agree.
Yeah. Go ahead, D.
I completely agree. Bryce Gurry was on our show a couple weeks ago, and she talked about players needed to bring that leadership. And Sandra said basically exactly what you said. I think Krueger brings all of that and more into the back line. This player's also been left off of rosters. She's made rosters. She's been injured. She's had a baby. This player has gone through so much, and she's so steady and consistent. And something we don't talk a lot about as well is her service into the 18. She is one of the best crossers, up there with Jenna Neiswanger, I think, in the league as an outside back. So I think she'd be remiss to not bring her in, and the versatility just to add a little bit more depth across that back line is key.
Darian, who surprised you that was included in this roster? Anyone?
No, this is exactly what I put out there.
What about the alternate?
As an alternate, okay. I'll say Hal Hirschfeld. I thought Sam Staub was actually going to be one of the alternates. We didn't hear much about Hal Hirschfeld from the training camp. She came in as a training player with Corey Bethune, and I personally didn't hear much. I think she's a fantastic player, but I think this is a statement by Hayes to say these are the future players that we're going to be incorporating post Olympics. You're going to be involved in everything we're doing forward. We're going to build this team with you included in it. But I really would have liked to see Sam Staub. But I mean, Hirschfeld, I think she can play a couple different places in the midfield, and I can see her working well with Coffee. Her and Bethune have really good connections. So I like it. What a way to get them experience going into the Olympics and being around the team, and just getting used to that type of environment and the competition that they're going to be involved in.
How much do you think playing at Washington Spirit with Croy Bethune, Hal Hirschfeld, Trinity Rodman has a factor in bringing both of those players, Croy and Hal, as alternates?
Massive. If you see players that have good chemistry, that work well off of each other, they're developing in the league at the same rate. They're also playing with a really, really talented roster on the Spirit. Players that ask a lot of different things from you. I mean, Ule Sar, Trinity Rodman, Corey Bethune, they all ask different things of you, how to adapt, how to play, where you're playing them, speed, texture on the ball, what different players are looking for you to be able to adapt in a game with that and be consistent with it, I think is a huge nod for going into a camp where you only get a specific amount of time to work with a bunch of different types of personalities and players. If you can do that on the club level, I think it's a really, really big plus for you to go on to the international level in that short amount of time and be able to show your stuff.
Lynn Williams is listed also as an alternate in this group as a forward. She hasn't played in the NWSL since May 19th. She's been out with injury. Now, that May 19th game, lest we not forget, that's when she became the NWSL all-time leading goal scorer. But she's been listed as out with an injury, even as recently as this last week for Gotham in match day 14. Williams also wasn't called up to the June international camp, presumably due to these injuries that she had in June. Sandra, does the inclusion of Williams surprise you at all on this alternate roster list?
A little bit, only because of everything that you just ran down in terms of a timeline of events, especially, and kind of alluding back to what I already mentioned. When I touched on a little bit with Krueger, how does Lynn Williams fit in a Emma Hayes system? I think that's a even bigger glaring question, knowing the forwards who are going as fully rostered players and how they have functioned within her system. What we got to see just over the course of a couple games with her first ones on the sideline there. But I think especially with maybe the injury, question mark around there, like how available is she? She is going in an alternate position, so it's going to be a little bit different of capacity in terms of the weight that she'll carry as a player going to the Olympics. But I think when it comes to, again, looking at maybe some of the other omissions and looking for players to fill out a balanced roster, Williams is someone who was at those Tokyo games as well. Also in a bit of an alternate capacity, but did medal, was rostered because of the rules that were applied at that time. Coaches got to utilize a full 22-player roster that was allowed just shortly before those Tokyo games. So will we even get to see her in these games? Is it just about getting players who know what it means to be in these camps and provide that other bit of competitive edge within the training? So I think that also has a bit to do with it as well. But I think it's still a little bit of kind of that surprise element to it, because when you look at the alternates, you've got Campbell, right, who also had that experience as an alternate. You've got Williams with that experience, but you've got two rookies who are like coming out of NWSL who do not have those experience and only have training camp experience. So it's kind of like I think the alternates are probably the most surprising part of this roster as well.
I love that Lynn Williams got the alternate position. Yes, she's been out with injury and maybe hasn't had the best performances we've seen from her in the previous camps. But her DNA as a player is she's a game changer. Lynn Williams is one of the most effective forwards defensively and offensively, in my opinion. So to bring her as an alternate, people go down all the time, injuries happen, knocks happen. If you're going to bring somebody into a camp that you want to come in and score goals, or if they're a role player, you're coming in to defend. We need you to run up and down the sideline, all over the pitch, and make a difference. I would be choosing Lynn Williams. So I like that she got this nod. I see the logic behind it. I think it's needed. And Sandra, you're right. To have that experience with the other alternates is key.
Emma Hayes, when she makes these rosters and she makes decisions, it is so multifaceted. And there's so many layers to the decisions that so many of us are not privy to. In bringing Lynn Williams as an alternate, which has different rules than in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, because the alternates are not to be used unless you remove a player from the main 18 roster. So the hope essentially for US soccer is that they never have to use their alternates, right? Because that would mean an injury to one of the 18 players. So if you think of it from that perspective, bringing Lynn Williams as a training player, relatively speaking, to the Olympics is such a smart move in my mind.
Mhm.
Think of her defensive pressure in training every single day, putting pressure on the back line for the United States so that they are forced in training to play under high pressure against someone that is incredibly quick, can read defensive lines well. I think the counter press that Lynn Williams provides on the pitch is something that is often overlooked as her best quality. And to have that in training, knowing that there are going to be teams that the US goes against in the Olympics that are going to press and put the goalkeeper and the back line under pressure. And she's going to run as fast as a ball can move. And that to me is a decision that Emma Hayes does not take lightly in bringing these specific alternates, Jane Campbell, Hal Hirschfeld, Croy Bethune, and Lynn Williams, and specifically Lynn Williams in this instance to be brought into the camp. We're talking a lot about alternates now, in addition to those 18 players, but the United States and Emma Hayes have also called in training players. So these are players that will join the United States in camp leading up to the Olympics. I just want to give a shout out to those players. Forward, Alyssa Thompson, defender Kate Wiesner, and defender Emily Sands. Kate Wiesner is at Washington Spirit, Alyssa Thompson at Angel City, and Emily Sands at Orlando Pride. It will be her first call up to the senior national team. So you can catch those players when the United States plays their 2 send-off matches, July 13th in New Jersey at Red Bull Arena against Mexico, and then July 15th against Costa Rica at Audi Field in Washington, D.C. Interesting, the Thompson, Wiesner, Sams call up. Did any of that spark interest from either of you, Sandra or Darian?
Surprised about Wiesner. I'll just be wrong. I just thinking back to those couple of games with Emma Hayes on the sideline and having, gone to the one in Minnesota. Just, yes, of course you hear good things about the training camp players, but maybe you hear more about another player than another. And I definitely heard more about Hirschfeld, and others in the training camp. But I think it goes back a little bit to what we were talking about, having that connectivity and chemistry from club and maybe seeing how that translates into national team camps. I mean, when we look even just at this full roster, there's a number of Spirit players, and there's obviously a huge handful of Gotham players, right? Let's not act like that stuff isn't important. I think it's actually a bit of a blessing that this is a team that can have a certain specific amount of players playing for club and actually have that chemistry translate to the international level. That's not always the case for a lot of these players. It is right now. So I think that's maybe a little bit of a part of it in her inclusion as a training camp player, at least for these Olympic send-off games.
I agree. I was a little surprised to see Kate Wiesner because we don't see her start consistently with the Spirit or get
Yeah.
minutes even that consistently with the Spirit. So maybe there is some chemistry we don't see in training camp. Uh, she can kind of play everywhere, so I get that. Yeah, I'm interested to see what that means for the future. I think there's an undertone to selecting these players to come train. A big shout out to Emily Sams. I think she's had a great year with Orlando Pride. I think this is very much deserved, and good for Alyssa Thompson. I think this is a player that we've seen struggle a lot with confidence since World Cup. She hasn't scored yet in the NWSL season. She's racked up a bunch of assists, but as a forward, it's tough when you haven't put one away and games by games pass by and you see people talking about it. So to get us all to shut up, and hopefully this gives her some confidence coming back to the season to get some goals and just get back to enjoying the game. I think we haven't seen her smile on the pitch that much, and she's so young. You should just be having so much fun. You're a pro athlete. You should be enjoying your day to day going on the pitch and scoring some goals. So I hope we get to see that, and this kind of propels her to go in that direction after this.
This call up for Alyssa Thompson as a training player for the US could definitely be the confidence boost that she needs for just week in and week out NWSL play. Like, even after this camp, playing in the Summer Cup with Angel City during the Olympics, I think it's ultimately going to help her. I agree on the snaps and the shouts for Emily Sands. This is so well deserved for her. But interesting that Sam Staub isn't called in. That's what I was thinking. I was like, if
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're going to bring in some players to train, you might as well bring in the ones that have done really well previously.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I had her going as an alternate, so I'm a little bit
I did
surprised
too.
here.
No
Interesting.
defenders.
No
Yeah.
defenders as alternates. But you also have
Yeah.
Crystal Dunn, who's listed as a forward that can be an alternate
And Sonnet can play everywhere. So
everywhere. So interesting in the US soccer notes that were released with this roster. The very first note says that this roster is broken down by position, but numerous players on the roster can and have played in multiple positions for the United States. That is like the first disclaimer that
Yeah.
Emma Hayes wanted out there.